I would like to introduce Elaine Ingham. Elaine and I have just met at this conference. One thing we have in common we didn't realize is we both graduated from Colorado State University, so we've got to talk more in depth later. That'll be great. Elaine is the food web person, and we are looking forward to having her take us into understanding the soil life that we're all trying to create with all our management above ground. We can't see what's happening underground, that reflection of the land that's above ground. And we're managing by leaves and soil surface. She's going to get into what's happening underground, that reflection that we can't see, but that is our soil capital, and we're living off the interest above ground. So Elaine has worked with, my understanding, with Rodale some, along with quite a few other places. Would like to welcome Elaine Ingham.
So, life in the soil is what we're going to talk about. Typically, I give a 3-day course about life in the soil, so you really get to understand a lot of the nuances. I give a day-long course on compost and how to compost so that you have these wonderful organisms in your soil. And then I give a day-long course on compost extracts and compost teas, how to extract the organisms and grow them, so then it's easier to apply them in that liquid form. And then I teach a 2-day course on microscopy by a small microscope, $300 for a really good quality microscope, does shadowing. And so you can start looking at your own organisms in your own soil, starting to figure out, I don't have what needs to be present to grow the plant I want to grow. When we're growing weeds, if what Mother Nature is sending you is the information that you're trying to grow plants in dirt instead of soil, what do you have to fix? How do you fix that? Weedy species, things that we would all agree are weeds, disturbance requiring ecologically defined weeds, require strictly bacterial dominated soils. As we get the fungi back into the soil, we are going to move our biology. We're going to change the soil so the conditions are set to grow other plants that we want. And I'm going to go through this whole system with you. But I would really like to have everybody in this room learn how to identify their own organisms. So you go out and grab the soil sample. You mix it up nice. You take 1 gram and put that into a test tube, and you add 4 mils of water, shake it for about 30 seconds. A drop of that mix goes on a microscope slide, a cover slip goes on top of that. You look through the microscope and you go, oh, there's nothing there. No wonder what I'm growing are weeds. Or, hopefully, you could look through the microscope and you go, wow, look at everything moving around, and I got fungi, and I got protozoa, and it's just, all right, I'm going to grow some good grass this year. So you can figure this one out for yourself. It takes just about 20 minutes for you to do an assessment like that. So better than you waiting for 2 weeks to get the information back from a laboratory. You assess your biology right now. No changes because that sample had to go through the mail. What changes might happen between you put it into the overnight FedEx Express or the overnight bag and it gets to the laboratory and then we look at it and we send you the information back. Because when did you need to know? 2 weeks from now? You need to know right now. And so that's what we would like to do, is teach you how to do your own assessments. Yes, I would love it if all of you in the room would send me samples so I could make some money. But that is not my purpose in life. So teaching you how to do it yourself. So yes, I have the Bachelor's of Arts degree, the Master of Science, the PhD. Look at that, I got the alphabet soup after my name. Woo! So Soil Foodweb is my company. I started it. Soil Life Consultants. I work with a number of landscape architects and trying to bring along a whole herd of students learning how to do this. So if you want to get hold of me, it's soilfoodweb@aol.com. And if you send me an email and I don't answer within 3 days, send it again. Because your email is now down about 500 or 600 emails in my list. And I don't always get back to them. I apologize, but that's how life works. So when we're looking at life in the soil, and we start trying to understand what the benefits are of what this biology does for you in the soil, I like to show this picture because a lot of people who grow grass can't believe that root systems of grass grow this deep. This is a 3-month-old grass plant. And because the soil had the biology, because the organisms were there building the structure, protecting that root system from disease-causing organisms, cycling nutrients and keeping that plant healthy, that plant has put its root system down 4.5 feet in a 3-month period. Imagine how deep these roots are going to go by the time this plant gets to be 10 or 15 or 20 or 100 years old. How far down can roots go? And it's based on the plant that you're growing. You have to know something about your plant. When we're looking at ryegrass in somebody's lawn, how far down can the root systems of ryegrass go? Easily 15 feet. So if you go home and you look at the grass in your pasture, and if it's not down at 15 feet, what's the take-home message? Mother Nature's trying to tell you, you're trying to grow plants on dirt, and you're not going to be successful. We need to get this biology back in the soil. This is work that I did with Hendrika Schraven, who's a landscape architect up in Seattle, Washington. And this is Hendrika's holding that plant. We grew grass in a sward area with really good biology down into the soil. We punched a PVC pipe down into the soil, pulled the plant, roots and all, up out of the soil, cut the PVC pipe open, washed that root system with a little bit of water from the hose, and took the picture. Hendrika Schraven is a 6.5 foot tall person. That root system is 4.5 feet, and that's only 3 months old. So we need to get this biology to build structure, to get that root system to grow as deep as it possibly can. If the roots of your plants are down even at 4.5 feet, 8 feet, 10 feet, 15 feet, do you have to worry about drought in the summertime? No. We're going to get all the water that we need moving into that soil, infiltrating and being held in that soil, because that plant is putting out exudate. The plant puts out the foods to feed the organisms. Every single plant releases exudates from its root system. What's an exudate? Isn't this like the secret society of scientists? What do you mean when you say exudate? Yes, we have our own language and we don't want you to know what we're talking about, because don't we sound smart when we use the foreign language? So, what's an exudate? Well, if you take the meaning of that word, it's something that's exuding from the body. Oh yeah, sweat, that's an exudate. So when we're releasing these things, what exactly is the chemical composition of an exudate coming out of the root system? And guess what? It's coming out of the top part of the plant too. Every leaf, all of the bark, when we're looking at flowers, when we're looking at fruit, they're all releasing exudates to grow the proper set of microorganisms on the surface of the plant, to protect the plant from disease, to cycle nutrients, to build structure in that soil. So exudates. Exudates are comprised mostly of simple sugars, a little bit of protein, and a little bit of carbohydrate. So when I ask you to go into your kitchen and make me a recipe of that material, what's simple sugar in your kitchen? White sugar, brown sugar, honey, molasses, all those wonderful sugary things. So take a bowl, and you're going to put a bunch of sugar in there, maybe a little bit of all of those different kinds. And now I'm going to go get some protein. What's protein in your kitchen? Eggs, maybe some cheese, milk. So let's put that in there. Okay, carbohydrate. What's carbohydrate in your kitchen? Flour. So now I've got mostly sugar, a little bit of protein, a little bit of carbohydrate. What is this a recipe for? Cakes and cookies. Your plant is releasing cakes and cookies out into the soil in order to grow these bacteria, fungi, protozoa, nematodes, and we need to understand what these organisms do for your plant, and that's where I'm planning on going today. Notice the fact that we cut this plant a couple times during the year. So about 3 days before we punched the hole and pulled this root system up, we cut this plant to 1/2 inch. Now, if it's true that when you cut the top part of the plant to 1/2 inch, it causes the root system to slough off to 1/2 inch. If that's true, then this root system regrew in 3 days, 4.5 feet. I don't think so, do you? This plant did not lose any of its root system. When it was artificially grazed, otherwise known as mowing, it did not cause any loss of that root system. If this plant's healthy, it does not lose any of the root system. That's stored carbon. It does not have to be replaced. It is not a metabolic drain on your plant. So when your animals graze your plants and your plants are healthy, you're not losing any of the root system. In fact, what happens, and there's a couple of papers in the scientific literature that show this, from back in 1984, 1986, 1989, that show that when you graze the above ground part of a plant, it causes a massive flush of exudates out of the root system. And so if you're putting a massive amount of sugar, proteins, cakes and cookies into the soil, the bacteria and fungi are going to respond and start growing very, very rapidly. The bacteria and fungi are the organisms that make the enzymes to pull nutrients out of your sand, out of your silts, out of your clays, out of your organic matter, out of the rocks and out of the pebbles, and store those nutrients in the bacterial and fungal biomass. There is not going to be any leaching. You are not going to lose any of those nutrients because they are not soluble. They are not plant available. So how do we get those nutrients that the plant has directed the bacteria and fungi to go out, make those enzymes, pull those nutrients into their bodies? How do we get those nutrients available back to the plant? Well, that's where we have to have the predators of the bacteria and fungi. And who are the predators of the bacteria and fungi? Well, bacteria are eaten by protozoa. Hopefully in an aerobic system, it's going to be the flagellates and the ammoebae. It's going to be the bacterial-feeding nematodes. Bacterial-feeding nematodes, what do they eat? Bacteria, yes. So, the things that eat bacteria, what eats fungi in soil? Well, it's going to be the fungal-feeding nematodes and the fungal-feeding microarthropods. Earthworms eat both bacteria and fungi. They're pretty non-specific. So anytime the bacteria and fungi are eaten by any one of their predators, the nutrients that have been tied up at extremely high concentrations in the bacterial and fungal biomass are going to be released into the soil right at the surface of your root. So when that plant is grazed, flush of exudates, millions and billions of bacteria, miles and miles or kilometers and kilometers of fungal hyphae going to be grown, pulling nutrients into their bodies. Here come the bacteria feeders, the protozoa, the nematodes, the microarthropods, the fungal feeders. They're going to eat the bacteria and fungi and release right to that root system precisely the nutrients in all of the balance, in the proper balance for your plant. And so at precisely the moment that that plant is beginning to regrow the above ground biomass, photosynthesizing, and your plant's making all the sugar it needs, but where's it going to get the nitrogen, phosphorus, sulfur, magnesium, calcium, sodium, potassium, iron, zinc, borate, the whole mix? How many nutrients do plants require? All of them. I love the fact that, when I was a little kid, how many essential nutrients did we think about? Well, how old am I? So 53 years ago. How many essential nutrients? 3, NPK, right, like that's going to grow a plant. That's going to grow you, excuse me. So by the time I got to high school, how many essential nutrients? It was up to 8. By the time I was in college, how many essential nutrients? It was up to 12. Today, how many essential nutrients? Most plant physiologists will agree, most, notice I said most, because in the world of science, do we agree on stuff? So, most plant physiologists will say how many essential nutrients? You don't know? Do you guys grow plants for a living? Okay, because we argue about it all the time. Well, it's the answer to the universe. Remember the Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy? What's the answer to the universe? 42. There are 42 essential nutrients, and you better balance them all correctly. You put an inorganic fertilizer out, you put rock dust out, are you going to be balancing the nutrients for your plant in a plant available form? You put nitrate fertilizer out, have you not messed up the physiology of your plant? Because you forced just one nutrient in extremely high concentrations. Can't be doing that. Your plant needs balance. And so when those bacteria and fungi are eaten by the protozoa, nematodes, microarthropods, earthworms, and such, balance of all of the nutrients. Your plant takes it up and starts to regrow using the sugars to form the structures, to form the protein, the carbohydrates, all of the lipopolysaccharides, all the essential metabolites that that plant has to have. Your plant doesn't slough the root system. If it sloughs its root system, how is it going to get the nutrients that it needs? How is it going to get the water that it needs? So there's no loss of nutrients. But what if you come in and you graze that plant and you allow those animals to come back before the sugars and the proteins and the carbohydrates get replaced and stored again in that root system? You're stressing the plant. It's a little bit of trouble because when you come in and graze again, it forces a big pulse of nutrients, the exudates, out into the soil. And so the bacteria and fungi grow, the protozoa and nematodes, and they're releasing the nutrients back to your plant. Your plant starts to regrow. What if you come in and graze too soon? Now you're really stressing your plant. How many times can you come back and eat that grass too soon before the nutrients are restored, replenished in that root system to the point where if you do this often enough, yes, then your root system is going to slough. And if you slough your nutrient gathering capacity, if you slough off the mechanism by which you obtain water out of the deeper regions of the soil, especially in a dry summer period, what's going to happen to your plant? Okay, it dies. So there's a message from Mother Nature. If your root system looks like this, is there a root system on here? This is out of a golf course green that has been hammered excessively. And look at the root system of that grass. Yes, it is cut to 1/8 of an inch every day, and the root system goes down to there, 1/8 of an inch deep. And so you see where grass people dealing with turf, they say, well, because we cut the top of the plant to 1/8 of an inch, the root system only goes down 1/8 of an inch. Right. Look at whatever the other information is in this soil. What's causing that black, dark color? When you take that coring tool and you punch a hole in that turf and you pull this core up, what's the smell? Woohoo! Yeah. Oh boy, does that smell bad. It's a mixture of ammonia, a little hydrogen sulfide gratinate smell, a little vomit, a little putrescine, a little acetic acid, and a little sour milk smell. What does that smell like? Yeah, oh yummy. Yeah, and what is that telling you? This soil went anaerobic. This black, dark layer is the residues that are left behind when we lose our nitrogen as a gas, when we lose our sulfur as a gas, when we lose our phosphate as a gas. And so if we allow this soil to go anaerobic, we're losing the nutrients that would otherwise be available for our plant to be able to regrow. As we go anaerobic, all kinds of other bad things are produced, and I want to very quickly go through that. How do we rebuild the structure in that soil? And what happens to your root system as we rebuild the structure in that soil? So yes, a very stressed plant because the root system is only going down 1/8 of an inch. There's a really horrific thatch layer. We've got to chew up, we've got to decompose that thatch layer so the anaerobic disease-causing fungi, the root-feeding pests, are not going to find this a happy habitat anymore. Right now, this is one sick, unhealthy, unhappy plant. So what we do is we come along and we apply the proper sets of organisms. In a compost tea when we're dealing with turf, because they don't like compost, they don't like the organic matter sitting on the surface of the soil. So between this picture and the next one I'm going to show you, we have applied compost tea, where we have extracted the organisms using water, aerobic conditions, put a little bit of additional foods in to really push fungal growth. And after a 24-hour tea brew, we apply that tea, and we have done that 3 times. Can you notice what's happened to the anaerobic compounds present in the soil? They've disappeared. The bacteria, the fungi, have eaten those materials, put it back into the structure of their bodies in the organic matter, and the root system on this turf, there's our turf, we're still cutting it in 1/8 of an inch every day. How far down are the root systems? This is the bottom of the root system. So in approximately a month, that root system has grown down a good 4.5 inches. Do not tell me that because we cut the top of the plant, it's going to cause the roots to slough off. Because we are growing roots. Today, the roots in this golf course are down at about 8 feet. And they're still mowing it every day to 1/8 of an inch through the growing season. Not going to lose roots. So we need to understand this whole system below ground. We need to understand what happens when you compact your soil. And think of all the different things we do out in our agricultural systems, even in our turf systems, in orchards. Think of the things that we do constantly to compact that soil. Every time we drive big equipment up and down and over our soils, we're compacting at depth. And when you drive a pickup truck over your soil, where do you compact your soil? It's not at the surface. Plant physics tells us that the compaction layer is going to form at depth based on the weight of the equipment and the width of the tire. So your typical common everyday pickup truck is going to cause compaction at about 18 inches. Why do we think root systems of our plants don't go lower than 18 inches? Well, where's your compaction? So start looking for where that compaction layer is. Here's an example, scientific literature, showing that in a well-drained soil, that root system is going to go all the way down until it hits the compaction layer. Waterlogged soil causes mottling. When we're looking at the water-filled pores, the 100% moisture in that soil, that's going to cut those roots off at that depth. What if our water table, our anaerobic layer is up a little bit higher? Well, okay, look at what's happening to your plant. Basically, it's going to kill the plant. So what's actually happening under anaerobic conditions when we waterlog the soil, when we impose compaction? In this was too good a picture to pass up. This neighbor wanted to build a barbecue pit. So they dug down into the soil and look at that profile. Why is it that the roots of that tree or the grass or that shrub, why aren't they going down deeper into that soil? Tree roots can push their way through concrete. They will break up dams. How can these roots not be going down through that compaction layer? Because there's something else involved. When we compact soil, water moving down into the soil is going to not be able to move from soil of one density into soil of a different density. And so there's our compaction. Water cannot move through. So water hangs up right here. Oxygen cannot move through water very rapidly at all. And so see that black, dark, anaerobic layer? And that's why that root system cannot grow any deeper than that. And so we think it's normal. In the world of arboriculture, in the world of agriculture, we think that because we see over and over and over again, we see roots going down just a little ways and then going sideways, we think that's normal. No, no, no. This is an artifact of the damage that we as human beings do to our soils. When you apply an inorganic fertilizer, it's a salt. You are going to be killing these organisms. When you use a pesticide, anytime a pesticide is used, it's going to kill way more than the target organism. So we can't be doing those things. We've got solid science to tell you why your clients, talking with them, getting them to convert from a conventional system, how we can, what the problem is and how they need to move along. So under anaerobic conditions, what precisely is it that's killing your root systems? Well, one of the things that's going to happen when we go anaerobic, and this is a compost pile, you can see the outer layer, all the starting materials. This particular pile was built with 50% manure. How fast are we going to go anaerobic if this pile is 50% manure? Wood chips, we've got some leaves, and you can see that it was ground too finely. Oxygen isn't penetrating any deeper than this. And you can see this facultative anaerobe starting to win in competition with all our good guy organisms in here. Yes, this is aerobic, but at about 4 inches deep into that compost pile, oxygen is dropping down into anaerobic conditions. And we see this white ashy layer. When I go out and start working with people in composting, they will always invariably tell me, oh, see, look at the good fungi. What? That's not fungus. That's a facultative anaerobe. That's an actinobacteria that if you use this material, if this gets put anywhere next to the root system of a plant with mycorrhizal fungi, the actinobacteria will kill your mycorrhizal fungi. Say goodbye. So we can't be allowing that. How well is your plant going to grow? If it needs to be mycorrhizal and you wipe out the mycorrhizal fungi with the wrong set of organisms going into your soil. So if you see this in your compost pile, turn it. Get oxygen back into your pile. Another thing that happens under anaerobic conditions, so I'm going to go through a series of what happens when we go from aerobic conditions in your soil or your compost tea or your compost extract or any place. Your aerobic organisms, or the aerobic conditions, the predominant form of nitrogen in your soil is going to be as organic matter or in protein. Most of your nitrogen in your soil is not in the soluble inorganic forms of nitrogen. It's in organic matter. It's in protein. Where's the protein in your soil? It's in the organisms. So the soluble inorganic forms of nitrogen. So nitrate grows annual plants. Nitrite will kill your plant if your nitrate is anywhere close to your root system. So we want your nitrifying bacteria to very rapidly remove nitrate and turn it into nitrite. Ammonium grows perennial plants. So we need these forms of soluble inorganic nitrogen in the soil. But under anaerobic conditions, the aerobic organisms just go to sleep. The anaerobic organisms wake up and, yep, they're going to make organic matter, they're going to make protein. The problem is the anaerobic organisms are going to take the soluble inorganic forms of your nitrogen and convert it into ammonia gas. And it leaves behind a black residue. How can you grow plants without soluble inorganic nitrogen? Because that gas blows off, it's gone, you are not going to be able to grow the plants you once could have grown. And what's ammonia going to do to the root system of your plant? Kills it. So, what happens to sulfur under anaerobic conditions? Same kind of thought process. Sulfur is usually present in the organic matter or protein. The soluble inorganic forms of sulfur. What's the form of sulfur your plant takes up? There's the list of soluble inorganic sulfur compounds for you. Which is the form your plant takes up? So I love it how your education has been, you haven't been told. So sulfate, SO4, that's what your plant requires. But under anaerobic conditions, what happens to all of these forms of sulfur? They get converted into hydrogen sulfide. It's a gas. It's going goodbye. How are you going to grow a plant? They won't grow their roots into that soil because it's not really soil anymore. We are turning it into dirt because that sulfur is going away as a gas. It leaves behind a black residue. So you know when it's happening to you. When we go anaerobic, your phosphorus. So the predominant form of phosphorus in your soil is in the organisms, your organic matter membranes of your organisms. So there's the inorganic, your rock phosphorus, you know. You have, drives me crazy, when we get people saying, our soils are really poor, there isn't any phosphorus left. What? Is that true? I'll show you what actually is present in your soil in just a few minutes after we get done with anaerobic problems. Under anaerobic conditions, of course, your phosphate, which is the form of phosphorus that your plant must have in order to take it up, your phosphate is going to be converted into phosphine gas. It's a gas. Say goodbye. How are you going to grow a plant? So under anaerobic conditions, we're losing our ability to grow the plant. Phosphine gas, does it smell? Does it, you know, because like with ammonia, all of you have smelled ammonia, right? You know what that smells like? If you don't know, go to the grocery store and open the bottle of ammonia. Woo! You all know what hydrogen sulfide smells like? Rotten eggs? Yummy. Mix a little ammonia and a little rotten egg together. What do we call that? Downwind to the stockyard. Now you can't smell phosphine gas, but this is one of the things we used as the trench warfare gases back in World War II, World War I. If you breathe any phosphine gas, it will kill you. So don't be chasing the fairy lights in the swamp. Don't go chasing will-o'-the-wisp, because those are clouds of phosphine gas. So anaerobic, you're losing your phosphorus. You cannot grow the plants you once could have grown. Under anaerobic conditions, we make some really nasty acids. And so under anaerobic conditions, only under anaerobic conditions do you produce these things. So acetic acid, what's that smell? That's vinegar. Butyric acid, what's that smell? See, I'm required as a scientist to use the scientific name, right? So butyric acid, sour milk, rancid butter. Valeric acid, what's that smell? Vomit. So when you're trying to remember this, V for vomit. Valeric acid. Putrescine, what does that smell like? Ooh. Now mix all of these things together. Yeah, just totally disgusting. It's what Sir Albert Howard called sour soil. The sour flavor that happens because you mix all of these things and the ammonia and the rotten egg together. When you're producing these things only under anaerobic conditions, these are all toxic to your plant, and these things by themselves will kill your plants, kill the roots. But another insult that's added here is what's the pH that's going to be produced under anaerobic conditions? The pH of these compounds is a pH of 2. So as the anaerobic conditions go on longer and longer and you produce more of these acids, what's going to happen to the pH of your, dare we call it soil? Your pH is going to plummet. There is no way to get a soil that has a pH below 5.5 unless you go anaerobic, at which time it's dirt, and I'll start calling it dirt. If your pH is less than 5.5 in your soil, it's not soil, because we've killed the organisms that help build structure, that protect your plant, that do the nutrient cycling. So no wonder your roots will not grow into these compacted anaerobic places. pH of, how are you going to fix this? Oxygen. Organisms build structure, get the oxygen back in there. They start to utilize all these nasty materials. Oops, going the wrong way. And recover your soil. But we've got to do that process in order to be able to grow plants in our soils ever again. And then, the most toxic plant material known to man, alcohol. If you have alcohol formation in your soil, well, how could you have alcohol formation in an aerobic condition? It has to go anaerobic. Why is it that you can drink alcohol and you're not killed? Because you've got a liver. How many plants do you know that have livers? They're completely defenseless against the effects of alcohol. Alcohol will solubilize the membranes, destroy the ability for your plant to hold anything within that root system, and it's going to die. So all of these bad things happening under anaerobic conditions, we do not want to allow anything to go anaerobic, and I get until 5 o'clock. So formaldehyde, phenols, what do they do to your plant? Yep, kill things. So here we are in an agricultural system. And where's the compaction layer in that soil? It's right at the plow layer. So because the plow pushes down on the surface of the soil at that depth, we're compacting it down. Water moving through here is going to hang up at the compacted layer. It's going to go anaerobic, and now good luck getting the roots of your crop. If the roots of your crops are only going down 4 to 6 inches, 5 centimeters, 10 centimeters, whatever it is, how could you possibly have enough water to keep your plant healthy and happy? How can that root system get the nutrients that it requires? On top of the fact that the anaerobic conditions are killing those roots right there at that layer. And so they're open infection courts for the diseases that grow in anaerobic conditions. So, how far down do roots go? They ought to be able to go, certainly all of our productive grasses. So this is a picture from the Great Plains of the United States, where back in the early parts of the 19th century, the Conservation Service, Conservation Corps went out and dug pits down to 40 feet in the Great Plains of the United States. So they then came along with a fire truck and washed the surface of that pit with a little bit of water so it was easier to see the roots. They put plate glass up against that profile, tracing paper on top of that, and they traced by hand the root systems of these grasses. When you look at this scale along here, this scale goes down to 25 feet. How far down do roots of grasses go? The most productive, the best grasses in the Great Plains of the United States, the ones that give the most protein to your animals, are the ones whose root systems go way deep into the soil. Some plants that will only go 15 feet, 8 feet, 8 feet, 10 feet. Can you tell me which one of these plants is Bromus tectorum, cheatgrass? Look for the plant with the smallest, the tiniest root system. Can you find him? Over there on the way left. Can you tell me why? It's called cheatgrass. Your animals eat cheatgrass, they're going to die. Because there is no nutrition in that plant. It can't get the nutrition out of the soil. Weeds do not put their roots deep into the soil. Root system of a weed only goes just a couple of inches into the soil. A weed sucks nutrients out of the soil as rapidly as it can and goes into seed production. Those seeds disperse and it goes back through its life cycle. Weeds cannot support the growth of our animals. So we need to get this biology back into that soil to build this structure for us. So how far down can roots go? We have to alleviate the compaction so the root systems can go down as deep as they possibly can. How deep is soil? I already mentioned that, so I'm just going to go on. Does your soil actually contain nutrients deeper than 4 to 6 inches? This is another one that drives me crazy when I talk to soils people, agronomists, horticulturalists. Roots, all of the nutrients are concentrated in the top 4 to 6 inches of your soil, the top 5 centimeters. Is that true? Absolutely not. Because we're going down 90 centimeters. And there really is not much of a change in any nutrient, except for where we've got a lot of leaching happening. Okay, look at that. What if you calculated the amount of lime you have to put in your soil by measuring this? And somebody would tell you you'd have to put 6 to 8 tons of lime on per acre in order to get the calcium up so you can grow plants. When in fact, when your roots go down, look at the calcium it's going to hit. So we really need to rethink. Anything that soil chemists have been telling you about your soil, start rethinking it. Because why would they misinform you? What are they trying to sell you? Where are they getting their money? If they can convince you to buy lime, please realize they're getting a kickback. They're getting paid because they're getting you to buy that lime. They are typically getting a kickback from selling you gypsum, from selling you phosphate, from selling you things you do not need. When we look at soil, what is soil? Well, defined by Hans Jenny, the father of soil science. This is the guy who started it. And he defines soil as the mineral component, the sand, the silt, the clay. Where does sand, silt, and clay come from? Yes, breakdown of your parent material, the bedrock, of all of the rocks and the gravel. And so as that splits apart into the different size fractions of the mineral material in your soil, very important component, because this is where your mineral nutrients are stored. They're not leachable, they're not going anywhere. Soil, by definition, must have organic matter. And typically, when we're looking at productive soil, that organic matter must be above 3%. If you want to be growing these organisms, because of course that's what the organic matter is there for, is to grow these organisms. And so soil, by definition, contains the aerobic organisms that we require. When we look at the mineral component of your soil, this stores all the nutrients. Are the nutrients present in the sand, the silt, and clay adequate to grow your plants? This table is in every introductory soil science textbook. There is no soil on this planet that lacks the nutrients to grow plants. There is no soil that can't grow plants. Why are you putting inorganic fertilizers out there? Why is the conventional system saying the only way to be able to produce plants is to put those inorganic nutrients back out there? Why is it that people tell you that when you harvest your plants from your systems, you're carting off the nutrients and now you're going to have to add those nutrients back? Really? They're already in your soil. Look at the amount of calcium. And this is per gram of your soil. Look at the nitrogen. Look at the phosphorus. Look at the... It's absolutely garbage. When somebody says, oh, we're in danger because we're running out of phosphate on our planet and we're going to have to find some really high-tech way to get phosphorus out of wherever they think it is. Because look at how much phosphorus is present in 1 gram of your soil. You've got enough phosphorus to grow the next 100 years of your plants in that soil. And what if you use up all this phosphorus that's present in this gram of the soil? Do you have another gram of soil hanging around? Is your mineral material, your sand, your silt, and clay, is replenished every second of every day? Your bedrock is breaking down, your rocks, your gravel, your pebbles. Does organic matter have light? Does organic matter have phosphorus, sulfur, magnesium, calcium, sodium, potassium, all of this list? Well, of course it does. So until the day you run out of sand, silt, clay, rocks, pebbles, ground, bedrock, or organic matter, there should be no reason to put additional nutrients back into your soil. Oh, you've got to put rock dust out there. What? I think you already got rocks in your soil. Any of you lacking rocks? Any of you lacking organic matter? No, there's no reason. So then why is it then that when we put fertilizer out there, the plants start to grow? Because that's not soil, that's dirt. Mother Nature is telling you a very important message. If you put fertilizer out there and your plant starts to grow, you don't have the life in your soil. And remember, in the definition of soil, you have to have the organisms. That must be present. If you don't have the organisms to do the nutrient cycling, it's dirt. Start calling it what it is when you put an inorganic fertilizer out and your plants start growing. So think of a soil chemistry test and kind of the different pools of nutrients that soil chemists like to talk about. They will talk about the soluble pool. That's what's in solution. And about the total amount of nutrients that are present in your soil, only this teeny tiny little bit is actually in solution. We need to have the organisms to pull those mineral nutrients out of the rocks, the sands, the silts, the clay, the organic matter, and convert it into the exchangeable and into the soluble pool. It is life that does that. No life, it's not soil, you can't grow plants. So we have to get this biology back into the soil. We must understand this food web so that we aren't going to be held hostage by people who want to sell you something that you do not need. So, the soil food web. All of the critters in your soil. So when you think about this, here's my plant fixing energy in the form of sunlight energy in the sugars. The sugars are put down into the root system. The exudates come out of those roots and they grow bacteria and they grow fungi. Bacteria make the enzymes to pull the nutrients from your sands, your silts, your clays, your rocks, your pebbles, and your organic matter. All of the nutrients for any living organism have to be balanced just about the same in all cells. So they're pulling those nutrients on the side. The bacteria will build the microaggregates. So all those little clay particles start to be glued together by the glues that the bacteria form around their bodies. Why would bacteria make glue? Why would they require a nice glue layer around their body? Because if they're free in the soil solution, what happens to them? They're going to be washed away from their food. The bacteria want to be glued onto the surface of your plant root. They want to be glued on the rocks and the pebbles. They don't want to wash away from their food resource. Think about a bacterium that's not making glue, and water starts coming through that soil. This bacterium is going to be going, no, that's my lunch, don't take me away, oh, no, I'm going to die. So they make glue. It's a worthwhile use of their energy. So they are glued to the surfaces of anything that they can be glued to, and that builds microaggregates, the smallest building block of structure within the soil. The fungi then come along and they are going to bind those microaggregates together into macroaggregates. So now when you pick up your soil, and at any time during the year, you should be able to put your hand into the soil, pick up a handful without breaking your nails, without having to get a shovel, without having to get an implement to be able to punch into that surface. It should be well structured at all times of the year. If you've got adequate life, adequate organic matter. Stick your hands in the soil, shake it. Can you see all the air passageways, hallways, all the little caves in that structure built by the bacteria and fungi? The higher level predators, yeah, they're eating bacteria and fungi and releasing nutrients, nutrient cycling, done by organisms. But these guys move the microaggregates, move the macroaggregates, they kind of rearrange them. They kind of decide where all the different furniture is going to go in your soil house. And so they're building structure so the root systems of your plants can go down as deep as they possibly can. You will never run out of nutrients. You will never run out of water. Jeff Lawson and I have worked together in places where we've gone out into stone deserts. And Jeff rebuilds the structure in the soil. We get the swales back in there. It places to hold water, hold moisture. We make sure that the biology is in the soil so the plants can grow. And most of the rain, most of the water that we get in those desert systems is from dewfall. But over the course of the next couple months, we will accumulate enough dew so we will have open ponds of water. We have taken stone desert and turned them into an oasis in the course of one growing season. Chris Henegler in Australia has done the same thing in the Northern Territories. I'm sure many of you have these kinds of an example, but we have to have the biology to build the structure in that soil. So structure, nutrient cycling, protection of the root system against diseases, and of course then also above ground. So these are the benefits that your plant will receive from having the right sets of organisms present in your soil. And while I would love to talk about these things, I'm running out of time. So where do you get the organisms to put back into your soil? Grow your own compost. Grow the indigenous local organisms, the species that survive in your conditions. There's just one more thing we really need to understand. Now we work a lot here in England at Laverstow Park. I was going to tell you the whole process of how we got there, but one more thing, one more point. I've got to talk fast. When I started doing my work at Colorado State University, one of the things we started looking at were all these different ecosystems. And that was the first time ever anybody ever showed that in the least productive ecosystem, extremely weedy, lots of problems in here, this was strictly bacterial dominated. Dryland wheat, where we're not using pesticides, we're not using inorganic fertilizers. There are a few weeds in there, but a little bit of fungi coming into the system, suppressing a lot of the weed growth. Shortgrass prairie, a lot better diversity. We have very few weeds, a little bit more fungal biomass in that soil. Tallgrass prairie, whoa, equal biomass of fungi and bacteria in that soil. There are no weeds. Years we worked out on the tallgrass prairie, the tallgrass was 12 feet tall. I got lost a few times out there. Kind of fun. High mountain meadows, where the productivity was taken off by sheep and by cattle that they run on the meadows up in the mountains. So more productive. Lodgepole pine forest, the most plant production of any of these ecosystems, so counted as the most productive. Note that we're using plant production, not wheat production. And so that's kind of warped if you're looking at food for human beings versus all of the plant material produced. Very fungal dominated. 100 to 1,000 times more fungal than bacterial. And this is the first time anybody ever noticed this. This is the first time this is published. So when we go through succession, early in succession where no plants will grow, it's strictly bacterial dominated. You start to build that food web when you have enough nutrient cycling. Weeds will germinate, they will grow, they'll come into the system, but very bacterial dominated. 10 times more bacteria than fungi. Start getting weeds, you have a little bit of fungal food being put into that system. And so early successional grasses, the Bermudas, the brassicas, the cole and kale crops, non-mycorrhizal plants. But look at the fungal to bacterial biomass, it's a little bit more fungal. And that's what sets the stage to grow these plants and not those. Keep increasing that fungal biomass because there's more lignans and cellulose in those plants. Eventually, you will succeed into the mid-successional grass species, our vegetables, our Solanaceae, tomatoes, potatoes, those sorts of things. Only a quarter more bacterial than fungal. And then into our row crops, our highly productive grasses, very late in succession, high protein contents in those grasses if you have a balanced fungal to bacterial biomass ratio. Keep going now into a fungal dominated systems. We set the stage to grow shrubs and vines. Keep increasing that fungal food. We're going to go make a deciduous forest. Mother Nature then pushes us into old growth. Nature causes this shift in plant species because of the biology. The balance of fungi to bacteria in the soil. What kind of plant do you want to grow? Figure out what the proper ratio of fungi to bacteria are to grow your plant. Make your compost such that it has the biology in it so that you don't have weeds. You get proper nutrition, all the nutrients the plant requires, handed to it on a silver platter. You will not run out of water. You do not have to irrigate anymore. So succession, as we go through that successional process, just an example of what those ratios would look like, typical numbers for these different systems. So we go from very nitrate-dominated systems to systems that are balanced, equal nitrate and ammonium, to systems that have more ammonium than nitrate, which is what we require for those perennial plants. How come everything on this planet is not an old-growth forest? It's called disturbance. What's the most disturbing organism on this planet? Us. So we drive things backwards. Well, nature can drive things backwards as well. So I was going to give you an example of the work that we've done with camper down compost, but I'm sorry, I don't have time. They're back there going. So I was going to talk about composting and look at those pastures. Root systems of the grasses in the first growing season that we started to work with them. The nodules on the nitrogen-fixing plants This is where we've applied the compost and compost teas. This is the neighbor that's still in chemical growth, and you can see the difference in production. Now that last picture was, I think, December. Here we are in April. This has been grazed 5 times. This has been grazed once. Which pasture do you want? This has been grazed 7 times. This has been grazed once. And so we regrow the pasture grasses so rapidly with so much good nutrition in them that we could really come back in and graze these pastures within 10 days after the last graze. Probably, under extreme conditions that could happen. Compost that's put out for the most part, but sometimes if the fertility doesn't seem to be quite right, they'll put out a compost tea. But they're making their own compost on the farm. And so these are the examples where in that first growing season, we reduced the cost of the growers by $200,000 on a 300-acre farm in the first growing season. If you understand biology, you never lose production. You will never go backwards in being able to graze your plants. And they increase, typically in that first year, they increase their herd size by 15%. The diseases, the problems go away. Their bricks goes from 1 to 2 up to 11 to 13. So on that note, we're going to zip through a couple other things, and there is hope. We can do this. We have done it, and we've done it all over the world. So for those of you who want to contact me, there you go. Thank you very much for your time and attention.